Okay, we ready?
Yeah.
Okay, this is a meeting of the Finance Subcommittee for Lowell Public Schools. We will take a roll call.
Chairperson Bahu?
Here.
Mr. Conway?
Here.
Ms. Martin? 2 present, 1 absent.
Great. So what we're going to be going over is the current state of this year's budget. And I think we missed it on our last school committee meeting because sort of time was of the essence. So I figured we could have a subcommittee meeting to discuss what that looks like. And if we have any questions, the subcommittee members, maybe you can assist us with answers. Okay, I'll turn the meeting over to Billy Joe Menzes, our finance director.
Okay, so the report that was submitted for the February 7th meeting included a budget update that includes information on revolving account balances, an ESSA update, and a year-to-date budget report. And there's also a fourth report. It's an overtime report, but it's in there informationally only. It's not, there's not much I have to share with that. I wanted to let you know that this is the time that we start to really closely monitor the balances, like instead of once a month, actually send the year-to-date budget report once a week and compare where we stand with that so that we can have time to spend any surpluses we're going to have or address any deficits that we have. So I say that this is the time where we're closely monitoring and continuing to pivot. We constantly pivot with the ESSER funds due to staffing shortages and supply chain issues. We've had to redirect the funds along over the last 3 years. So the first attachment that you have is the revolving account balance report. And if it just lists all of our revolving accounts, and I put from 2018 until 2024, so that you can see that we were negative, our revolving account balances had a negative 0.18% when in 2018, I almost said 1918, but in 2018 it had we were depleted. Now in 2024, we're 5% above general fund, so we have we went up by 5%. We have we had the problem before where they were depleted. Now we have the opposite problem in 2. We actually have reached the ceiling for food service and for the circuit breaker account. That's a good problem to have because we now need it. Now that we're going to get drying up, we could use more revolving account fund balances. We can use more of the revolving account fund balances toward the budget, being that the ESSER funds are drying up.
And do we transfer that money to our general budget that's at the ceiling limit?
Oh, no, the revolving account? No, we're not. I always explain revolving accounts like savings accounts, but unlike our personal life where you can transfer money from your savings into your checking account, you can't do that. The general fund is separate from revolving fund. These funds, say athletic revenue, that has to be tracked separately. It can't go through the city's regular accounting. It all has to be tracked separately. So each of the revolving accounts on here give a description of what the revolving account is, and then you'll see the growth between 2018 and 2024.
And is there any limit that we could have in the revolving accounts?
Some of them. So for instance, food service, the food service revolving account balance should only be 3 months of operating expenses, which is about $2.4 million. And let's see, I would have it here. We have $6 million right now, and that is not because we weren't spending. It was during COVID. We would get funding, and then got like an influx of money coming in. The good news is that even though we've exceeded the 2.4, even though that's exceeding the ceiling, DESI knows that we've been working with them to spend the funds down. We've been replacing kitchen equipment across the district and different refrigeration types of things, so we are spending it down.
Does this money need to be spent by a certain date?
So unlike the city funds and grant funds that will get returned to the state or the city, revolving funds were allowed to carry the balances forward. But again, we still want to be strategic and spend down the food service money on food service investments. You have to get it approved. You can't just spend it. You have to, anything over $5,000, you have to submit for approval. And then the circuit breaker is the other one. That one, if you exceed the ceiling, it will get sent back. And that one, that's out of district students. Those students, we don't always know what, a student is ours, or let's say they identify the father as a Lowell resident, we can get charged for those students without even knowing we never even met the child, right? But on the flip side, we also have the situation where we have like revolving account balances that will get sent back if we don't spend it. So one way or the other, we have to address the circuit breaker and the food service revolving.
Okay, and we're in no danger of having any issues happen with our current revolving accounts.
So as a matter of fact, on the same page. We're both the types that are wary about using like food service revolving money, let's say like they used to with the budget. But I was explaining today that we're actually in a position that we could charge, let's say custodians that work in the cafeteria. We would be able to, if we need it, if we felt comfortable, we would be able to use some of this money. But again, we wouldn't transfer the money. We would just charge these accounts like through journal entries.
Okay, great. You move to the next section?
Yes, so the next section is the ESSER update. And the first attachment with that was a 3-year plan. When the previous superintendent, we constantly updated the ESSER. We would map out for 3 years, always. We would not just, we would not start a program that we could not continue for the next 2 years. So everything we were doing on the ESSER plan was to maintain. We wanted sustainability for anything that we put in there. So we did constantly pivot and change things due to the obstacles we faced, which were mostly pandemic type obstacles, like the supply chain shortage and staffing shortages. The next attachment under the ESSER update shows the tentative plan for the $10 million in facilities. That spreadsheet shows all of the things like shades, the STEM modulars, all of the different things that we're planning on spending. But again, before you can spend it, you have to submit something called a CapEx form to get permission to move forward. And then the ironic part is they won't approve it without a contract from the city, but the city will not give you a contract without a funding source. And the funding source is ESSER. We can't say that that's the funding source until you get the approval. So it's almost like these are the little nuances that cause complications.
Sure, but timing is of the essence because these funds need to be spent by what date?
June 30th, but
Are there any extensions?
there's extensions, but you know what? Not just be the good ones that really spend all the money and they extend it another year or two, or let you carry it forward where we wouldn't have had to rush. But right now, we need to monitor this. We were doing monthly updates. I would think that I'm going to watch ESSER weekly now, just to make sure that if any of the projects are falling through, that we work with the city to figure out some way. We don't want to send any money back. So we would want to identify other projects, if not the STEM modulars and other ideas that we were, other updates.
Sure. It's vital that we actually, use the money, but it sounds like the nuances that you described of, having one reporting group and permit and to go on and go back and forth is sort of time consuming, and it's late February right now. Can we get all of this stuff in place and be able to use the funds correctly?
10 million or on all of them?
Well,
So the 10
we can talk about the 10.
I'll say this. This is why we need to monitor it so that we can keep on, because let's say a project, the STEM modulars. I'm part of watching the money, but I'm not part of the actual getting it to go. So I wouldn't know if they were going to fall off schedule. But I do believe that as long as the money's encumbered. So from what I understand, as long as the money's encumbered with the vendor, that we're still they're going to honor the ESSER funds until September of 2024. That was the latest update I had.
Okay, so up to September 30th of 2024, as long as it's encumbered.
Yeah.
So the work needs to be completed.
No, the work does not necessarily have to be completed. It has to be encumbered, meaning that, so if the project, if there's still.
We're spending the money.
Yes.
We're showing it, we've got the purchase orders, we're getting the modular classrooms in, we're doing the work, we may run into some problems.
Right, and so they know that and they're allowing for that, but that's why your question was a good one as far, because if we don't get the money spent, if there are any delays between now on, if the vendor is facing the same challenge that we face, if they don't have staff or if they don't have supply chain, issues that are coming in, if they face those same issues and things get delayed again, and we need to be able to pivot and find another project.
Okay.
To spend the money.
Mr. Conway has a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Chromebooks, do we have a bottom line number on how much money we spend on the replacement and the repairs of that? Is that, where would I find that?
That is an individual account. Like if you look on, this is called the year-to-date budget report, and normally I would use this to find your answer.
Right.
But each of these lines could include, it wouldn't just be their Chromebooks, it could be other vendors purchasing other things, but I could actually, I know if you want, I can get this on from the next meeting.
Yeah, could you, I think, I want to narrow that down and see how much money, from what I'm hearing, that the breakage on those are absolutely incredible.
Yeah, that's what there's stacks of them, they said. And
Oh, I know, I've seen them, yeah, I've seen them. So if we could just, if you could give me some type of a rough estimate on that, because apparently, I mean, I couldn't believe, I forget offhand the number that have to be repaired every week. It was a crazy number, to be honest with you. And do we have any idea how much one of those will cost?
I think they're like $300.
The 300? Okay, all right.
Between 300 and 400 is what I know.
Yeah, and where would that come out of? What?
Total budget.
Normally, so what happened with this is during COVID, when we started to see so many
Right.
of savings from transportation, we had tons of, we had extra money, so we
Okay.
invested using ESSER funds at that time. We've been using grants, but typically, if we were gonna do a Chromebook investment, it would go under one of the technology lines. It would be under instructional technology.
Yeah, because you couldn't take it from the transportation at this point, obviously. Yeah,
Right.
so, okay.
So could you fill us in on this at the next school committee
Yeah,
meeting?
that would
What,
be,
the cost and rough estimate on Chromebook?
yeah,
Sure.
yeah, please, yeah. Yeah,
So
thank
you'd
you, I
like to
appreciate
have
that.
that?
Thank you.
It's ironic because they were just talking about that, so I didn't listen to the number, but they were talking about how it's wiping out their budget, so.
Yeah.
And I just need to ask the superintendent a question about the STEM modular classrooms. Is that still progressing and moving forward over at our STEM Academy? Yes. Terrific. I know there might have been some holdups.
So the current portion of that 3-year plan on ESSER was $28 million, 10 of which was earmarked for the facilities. But the other $18 million in this year's ESSER budget included things like Renaissance supplements, behavior supplements, PBR teachers, which help with positive behavior, building-based subs, a sub-rate increase, paraprofessionals, librarians, extended learning time, twilight and summer programs, early childhood expansion, and alternative ed expansion. So those things that were funded through ESSER and $18 million in ESSER funds this year now have to move over to the general fund. So currently in the budget, I'm moving everything from ESSER over into the general fund so that we can just see that just by doing a level service budget, how much are we going to be short?
So we don't know if we can afford it.
Right.
Right, so we have to identify that.
Right.
Okay.
And then the next attachment C.
Oh, yes, Ms. Martin?
Can I ask a quick question? I'm sorry. Thank you very much. So the 18 million, you're transferring it into the general fund, and what is it that's going to make up for?
Oh, no, the 18 million, yes, I can see, I'm glad you asked that because it does sound confusing. So when I say transfer the 18 million, I don't mean a transfer. I mean, move, on the budget document, how there's 3 columns, it says general fund, grants.
Right.
So when I say transfer, I mean move those columns in the ESSER all the cost in the ESSER column over to the general fund column. And what that's doing is saying, if we keep everything the way it is right now, how much would that cost us now that ESSER's drying up? All it's doing is just saying, we don't have that money anymore, move it over to general fund, and then we'll start making reductions based upon the full list there. Does that make sense?
So you're saying you're taking the expenses that were currently in our current budget listed under ESSER, and taking those expenses and transferring them into the general fund.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
as step
So
one,
with but we still have the funds in ESSER that need to be spent out.
yes. So so the reason why I'm sounding confused and probably is we're talking about two different years, right? So the presentation in front of us is current year, but then when I'm talking about moving the ESSER money, that is actually speaking of FY 24-25 year. So, yeah.
Okay,
Yep, so the $18 million is not transfer, we have to spend it this year, as we do with the $10 million and the other ESSER money. Everything needs to be spent by June 30th, unless we have some encumbrances on it, then we may be able to progress with purchase orders and stuff.
So when I'm saying the word transfer, just to clarify, when I'm saying transfer, I don't mean transfer money, I mean transfer some costs that are listed in the third column to the first column, that's what I meant, okay? Okay, so the next attachment was the year-to-date budget report, and I run those weekly, and I look at them, and there are certain ones that I know to look at. Like I know out-of-district tuition, watch that, health insurance, watch, there are certain ones that transportation that you need to watch closely. The thing to notice about that particular report is just that in January, when the report was run, we were 52.4% spent. And that's important because the way we do our budget right now and is we do average salaries. So why, if a school has a bunch of older teachers, we don't want that school to get charged more for their teachers. So we budget using average salaries. That's what our consultants told us to do. And so when you have a year-to-date budget report, if you have $100,000 in an account and the teacher's costing $110,000, you're going to look like you're short. You're not really short. It's just because you're using average salaries. So we do periodic cleanups throughout the year.
And that's how you got the 52.4%.
The 52.4% is the on the bottom of the year-to-date budget report, which is attachment C. It's the last page of that, which is page. Let's see, 25. So on page 25, you would see that it's 52.4%. The final column on page 25 shows but if you go through all of the individual lines, there are some that would say they're spent 120%, some will say 10%, and it's not because it's really a mess, it's because we're using average salaries, so. And then, another thing to note on this is on page 2 of that report, that year-to-date report, it shows one of the first entries shows an $11.5 million budget that was transferred out. While I was out on leave, the city CFO and my office decided to move the 11.5 that really was for raises. It was sitting there in that one account for raises. It was a placeholder, but it was moved to cover that ESSER facilities, the cost that the STEM modulars, it was moved there temporarily. You know how I said that DESI will not approve something without a contract, but the city won't give us a contract without the funding source. So we purposely moved those funds into the facilities line temporarily so that the city can move forward with the contract. But once we get an approval from DESI on the ESSER, spending the ESSER funds, we'd move that money.
Okay, and that's all completely legal, it's just that we're sort of showing money available for our projects
Yes.
through our ESSER. ESSER.
Yes, and what I do is I like to ask, when I do have something that I'm not sure of, I will ask the question via email so that I get a paper trail back from DESI showing that I did to have good faith, I made a good faith effort to do the right thing, So in any of these, if I run across anything that I'm not sure of, I will definitely reach out to DESI to get that paper trail.
Great.
And I think I already explained to you about the money being moved temporarily. The fourth report in here is just the overtime reports that were requested to be given monthly. I'm not sure exactly what type of information to put in this. I just printed it. And if you have any questions and you let me know, from now on, whenever I print that report, I'll make sure it includes that. Like, for instance, it does not have names in there. I didn't know if you wanted that or not, but, if you do, I can bring that at the next meeting. But overall, the finances are good. I know there were concerns as far as the number of bad bills. That's the only issue. If you look at everything else, the year-to-date budget report, we're spending. The revolving accounts are nice and healthy. The ESSER, we're spending and we're monitoring it closely. So, and our audits, we get a frequent reviews. We have an annual financial statement audit that's done with the city. That was good. We have like food service reviews and the end of the year report presentations. Yeah.
Are those audits available or?
Yeah, we can get them, yep. So these audit results, the end of the year report is audited every year, so I have to report on everything I do, from budgeting, spending, to reporting, and when I do this report, it gets audited. So not me, myself, my team, but it then gets audited. So what we're reporting is getting audited, financial statements, the food service, and any grant, an A133 audit. Like right now, we're doing a Title I review. But my point to you is that even with all of these different reviews, we have not had anything alarming. So I can confidently say that the finances are great. What I was going to reference as far as the when bills come in after the fact, we refer to them as bad bills here. It's just something we've picked up, but MGL 64, section 44 actually calls them delayed bills. So the way the language reads is we need to bring it in front of city council because we need to request funds. We have not needed to request funds except for the first year that I started in 2018. Other than that, we've actually had the funds. And one of the reasons I after the questions were asked, I went and reviewed and researched what could cause us to get more bad bills this time. You know, why did they increase? And then it dawned on me, I mean, we have 130 million extra dollars in the last 2 years flowing through my office with no additional staff. So 130 million either hit in the payroll or the accounts payable, and there's only one accounts payable person here. So there's one person paying all the bills. All the schools got inundated with fair student funding money. So they're spending all that money, but that all flows through my office and then to City Hall. So not only are the schools inundated, we're inundated with no additional staff, but City Hall got impacted by it too. They get all of our stuff. But anyway, so other than that, other than the delayed bill issue, I feel as though we.
Okay, and I just want to ask one question about that delayed bill. Sure, you don't have enough staff, and that's very difficult to work through, especially when you have an extra $100 million to work with. But we do have vendors that have done work for us. And the vendors are invoicing us in October and November, and I've been getting some emails, we're not getting paid. You know, how do I get paid for the services that I've already rendered and such like that? How can we begin to pay these vendors off for the work that's already been done so that we can have a nice business relationship with them?
I agree, and here's what I can't promise that we won't have another bad bill. You know, I think I said that to at one of the city council meetings. They're inevitable as far as I'm concerned. I can't control other vendors. The delays are not in my office. The delays are if a vendor doesn't send it, or if there's a contract delay, or any, different issues. So your question was, how can we avoid it? And that's exactly what we do. We cannot promise they won't happen, but we do promise that every time there's a new type of problem happening, we'll address it so that it doesn't happen. For instance, we had, when I first started, they had bad bills that had not been paid from years before, like the vendor didn't even notice. It was 2 years, the bill was 2 years late. Their auditors caught it. Things like that. Then the second year I was here, I remember we were getting bad bills because they were the out-of-district tuition kids. They were emailing an employee from the special ed office that had already left. So then we created a solution for that, to put on the purchase order, contact accounts payable at, like directly to us. We tried to put it right on the purchase order. And then now we're facing the issues where if we get a bill for a kid that was a homeless child that never even stepped foot in our district, but their parent lives here, then we get a bill for a child that we never even knew about. Well, we didn't have a contract for that kid. Now it becomes a bad bill. We can't pay it, right? So these are we're trying to work with City Hall on how to find, if you have a situation that has two conflicting laws or obstacles such as the one I just mentioned, that we can work together to start a purchase order at least, because a contract could take 3 months, but we still have to transport that child. We can't leave the child not, sitting there. So in answer to your question, what we're doing now is we were doing quarterly reports where we send a quarterly open purchase order report to the schools so they can look and say, hey, why isn't that purchase order paid? That was back in September. And let's say we're in May, right? It gives them the opportunity to start researching. We were doing it, the grants manager was sending it off to the schools quarterly before, but now that we've seen that it's increasing, we're going to do the monthly, the open purchase order reports. I also, and you, the superintendent can verify this, I can give a perfect example. In June, or late May, early June, started sending all the department heads emails saying, hey, you have X amount of dollars not touched in this purchase order with such and such. So there was a vendor, and I had explained to the superintendent that they hadn't paid it, and it was 150,000. And they told him, oh no, Lowell paid. And I'm like, no, we didn't, because it would show right there. It would show, I know that. And they assured him that it was paid. And I'm looking right at the Munis, and Munis is not going to say they didn't pay something if it did, right? But come to find out that in the summertime, even though they had assured him that there was no outstanding bill, they sent us a bill in the summer. Even though, they're only as good as whoever they have working for them, just like we are. So sometimes the vendors are the ones, it's not necessarily like the person in my office or being short-staffed. It could be a post-pandemic hybrid work situation at one of the small vendors where they only work 2 days a week and they're not, I'm not sure. But all I can do is assure you that what we are going to do is keep on finding more and more solutions. If we find a new problem that causes us to have a delayed bill, we'll do it. But the good news is we don't need money. We're not asking for money. It's not like we're, a bad bill is something if you spent money that you didn't have. We did pay for this.
Okay, all right, we'll just leave it at that for a second. I think Mr. Conway has a question.
Yeah, that's it. It's been very confusing because I've seen it from both sides of the fence. I've seen it on the city council side that we get hit with the bad bills, and then I hear it on the school side also. Now, let me see if I can get this straight now. Somebody will do work, provide a service or a product, whatever it may be, and you're saying they don't send a bill. Is that?
No, because, no, I'm not, don't know whether, I don't know, because one would think if you didn't get paid in a year, you would notice, and especially when they're big amounts.
No, I'm sorry. I thought you said that somebody hasn't paid. Somebody hasn't sent a bill, which I'm kind of flabbergasted at that. I owned a business myself for a number of years. Believe me, I sent all my bills out. I wanted the money.
Me too, and no, I'm saying it could be that.
Yeah.
It could be that, what if they have an accountant working for them that's not, even though they're the vendor and they're doing the work, they don't realize their bookkeeper didn't do something. Or
It wouldn't be lasting long, I know
or
that.
it could have been lost in the, I don't know. If you have on the Sleeping Beauty movie, when the invitation falls underneath the rug, it could be one of those situations.
Right,
I don't
right,
know, but
right.
all I know is that Kelly is processing thousands of, she's not gonna just leave a bill sitting on her desk
Sure.
when she's paying all the other ones, so it means it never arrived. Or they could have sent it to someone's email, like that no longer works here, or, like a psychologist, the out-of-district tuition places, they might send it to the sped director.
Does this happen in corporations, or is it just municipalities, or what?
I'm not sure, I've always been in municipalities,
Yeah.
my whole career, but I would think it's more us because of the fiscal rules,
Okay.
But just so one of the things in the law, it states that we're going to the city council because we're asking for money to
Right.
pay for something that did not have a budget. One, we did have the budget for it, and two, we do still have current funds that can cover it.
Right. And I've said this before, and I'm going to say it probably a number of other times. You'll probably get sick and tired of hearing me say it, but again, because I see it on both sides of the city council and the school committee, that I think it is imperative And I know that there was a conflict of, with scheduling as far as this particular meeting is concerned, and to have the CFO from the city to be here too, just as working as a team, which I think is so very important, because I've said many times, there shouldn't be the school side of the city or the city side. It should be the entire Lowell side, as simple as that. And if we work together and we put our heads together and we have the CFO on both sides, I just have a strong feeling that we're not going to run into as many problems as we might have had in the past. That's just my own, observation on it. So I think that when we have our meetings in the future, I think it would be great to, again, reach out as just something, as a normal thing, to reach out to our CFO on the city side, to have them here, just invite them, because you know what? It's good to have two heads working on it. Why not?
It is, and I agree with you, and when you're at the last meeting, when you referenced scheduling a meeting, I actually reached out to them so that, and
Right.
explained their current finance meeting, they talk about like tax codes and all that too, right? And, but Connor had a good point, but it's still good for me to meet with the other finance team, even though I don't understand what they're talking about.
Right.
There's the camaraderie.
Right,
of it.
right.
But I asked if we could start a meeting where, like every week or every other week, where Connor, the city CFO, city auditor, and the city solicitor and myself, like that
Right.
way I get almost, I just have the opportunity to get their feedback on all the issues that I'm facing, because if they give me a solution, I need their input, because their input, they're gonna be the one that makes or breaks my decision, right?
Right,
They're
right.
the ones letting it get through.
Sounds like welcome guidance.
Well, I think that what we did too is we actually put a motion on to have that done. So I think that, that's just a matter of following through on the motion that was voted by the city council.
Meeting part.
Yeah, I think, and I was very specific in saying, not to say, oh, by the way, every week or every, bi-monthly or whatever it may be. It was obviously, you guys are professionals and so forth, and this is your expertise. So, you would make that arrangement, whatever arrangement, whether it was weekly or monthly or whatever. So I just think that no matter what happens, as long as we have the two parties, the two CFOs at the table working together as a team, that's it. No,
Great.
yeah, okay.
That's a
Great.
great idea.
Yeah.
And I think Ms. Martin has a question. Ms. Martin has a question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bahu. Just quickly, Ms. Turner. So with the bad bills, I know that you've given a lot of different kind of examples. The ones that I think have tripped us up the most, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but they've been the ones, like I think of the transportation ones, where we need to get transport student right away, and we can't get the contract in place beforehand. So it may go, a month, 2 months before we get the contract. But can you explain to me, because I thought that there was a component of this that's kind of tied to our fiscal year, that if you were able to resolve that within the fiscal year, you don't need to go to it's not considered a bad bill or a late debt unless it happens after that June 30th deadline.
Can I talk? Okay. That's what I always thought too, especially in an uncontrollable situation such as transportation. But this is what I was explaining when I said one of the other issues why you see a change in the number of delayed bills is because we've had four auditors. One didn't show up after the first week, but there were 4 auditors and they all have different rules. So and the new auditor, she is doing her job. She's protecting the city. So it's not like, but doing her job also makes it where it looks like Jay Lang may not have had these issues, bills come in after the fact. When he did, it's just that maybe that auditor could still pay it as a non-PO payment, or, like they would still pay it. So, in answer to your question, yeah, the transportation issues, we try to avoid that by talking to City Hall. We tried to come up with the solution. We worked with the solicitor, CFO, and auditor and came up with a temporary solution for John Dakota last June. There were contracts being held up, but we needed homeless students transported. So they allowed us to start a purchase order, but $5,000 goes pretty fast when you're paying hundreds of dollars per kid per day. So, yeah, John Dakota, I actually lost my train of thought right there. So, but did that answer your question?
Yeah, we're getting there. So, because I know one of the conversations we had last year, and I think it was around that same time frame, that end of June, with regarding transportation, we talked about being more proactive and putting in place kind of a PO that we could use on demand, that we could get approved ahead of time, because we work with specific transportation organizations, so it's, I'm not saying that there couldn't possibly be a new transportation company. There certainly could be. But for the most part, specifically, and especially around special ed, and even McKinney-Vento, we're using the same, basic companies, the same vendors over and over again. And we talked about the prospect of being able to put in place a PO for on-demand transportation, starting July 1st. We could enter into that contract for a legitimate amount of money. I mean, over the 5,000, I'm assuming the 5,000 number was picked because it doesn't require school committee approval, but it would make more sense to do one for $25,000 that the committee is approving, that then you can just go to that company when the homeless student, when the special ed student arrives, and it's already been pre-approved, the contract and the amounts and all that are already pre-approved, and it's just a per mile kind of fee that would get charged, and then we wouldn't have these backing up on us. Because I mean, I know I understand your point that we'll never get rid of all this as a problem entirely. That is the way of the world. People make mistakes. It's, that's just what it is. But it seems like there are certain aspects of this that we could take on, again, in a preemptive way, so that we're resolving the big issues. Like the idea of getting a late bill or a bad bill for $200,000 is untenable. There will be years when we would get that kind of a bill and we wouldn't be able to pay it. So we really need to, these large ones that to some extent can be anticipated. I mean, I know we talked about transportation. We also talked about cleaning charges when we've had to contract with companies to do kind of intense cleaning. That's the kind of thing you could, again, anticipate and put that PO, that contract in place to be used on an, as needed, on demand kind of basis.
I actually would like to draft a report for this if you don't mind, with more details, because I'm a little afraid that I'm going to say something, but I'm not sure. From my understanding, we went out to bid for that very reason, to try to do the per mile a thing, and we did not, from what I understand, and I'm going to confirm this tomorrow with John Dakota, but I think we didn't get any bidders. So I think that was part of our problem, that we've had that a couple of times happen, where we've been directed to, start an audit or something, and then we have no one applying for the bids, But I would like to be able to look that up and make sure that, because we have been trying to proactively address these issues, and then either the solution doesn't work, or, but I still want you to know that whether or not we tried or not. I do believe there was a bid in February, and I'll confirm it. Just as an example, I
February, like this February?
No, last February, when they went out to bid, but that would bring up, did we go out to bid again with, like with City Hall? But to your point, I still understand your point, and that we still have to find solutions and be proactive and make sure that we address it beforehand, so that we don't find ourselves owing money in times where we don't have money, so.
Okay, and I guess.
So if you could just get that information on the bid, what happened with it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. If we could get that at the next meeting, that would be great. And just as a rule, it would be great to kind of, find that out before we have to ask the question again. Thank you, Mr. Bahu. I'm done.
sorry I cut you short just for a second. And I guess the only question that I have is, you know, the more of the short-term bills, the October, the November, the December work, is that stuff being paid, or is it just that you don't have enough staff and we're having a hard time covering people? You know, we're trying to keep this meeting pretty short, so maybe a succinct answer would be great.
Can you ask that? Can you-
Sure, the people that are doing work for us in October are getting work done, and getting work done in November and December, which is recently, right? They're not considered bad bills or late bills. They just seem like they're asking about payment, and their businesses sort of lean on those payments. So are we able to sort of make that move a little bit quicker?
Well, our person has been doing overtime, and we did, ask a couple of other clerical staff to help with the, like, we get inundated at certain times of the year with bills. But I can say that there was a city councilor that reached out to me about a small vendor last year. And I understand, and we ended up paying that bill. And then come to find out, that vendor saw that city councilor again and said that they didn't get paid again. But it's not the same bill because we were able to look it up, you know, it must be a newer bill that, so sometimes when they're sharing information with you, you may think it's a bill that they were talking about a year ago, but that's been paid. We're now on a new bill. So in answer to your question, yeah, it's not as quick as it could be, and I'm afraid to hire new people when, if ESSER is drying up now, we may not need it next year. But at the same time, one person with $280 million of, you know, paying bills is.
Sure, I understand that. Only one last thought. Ms. Del Rossi, do you have any questions? Any questions?
I did have just a thought on what the feasibility was to enhance the accounts payable side of it so that maybe it will be more efficient and effective overall at this point. Just because it is a lot of work. And I know you had just mentioned, but you know, if ESSER funds dry up, but I just, for this point of it now where all the schools do have that first student funding, maybe it is worth it for now to help mainstream everything.
Okay, great. Point well taken. Thank you. So you're going to have a report at our next school committee meeting, reference to the busing?
Yes, your report. Did we, did we bid on the bid on transportation thing? I'll get some samples of the audits that we've had. And the other one was,
And something about the late bills from the last two meetings ago when it wasn't discussed thoroughly. Great. And now we're off to the FY 24-25 budget preliminary report.
oh, okay, I didn't even, realize that we wanted to do that one today, but, we did get an increase. We did get our Student Opportunity Act money, oddly, and I did ask this question, of Desi, but I haven't received an answer yet. The Student Opportunity Act is supposed to be 1/6 each year. And last year we got $30 million. This year we got 14 million. So it came in significantly less. The Student Opportunity Act money came in only at a $14 million increase rather than the 30 million that we got last year. Now, if we have to think for this year that we're going to have raises. We have our contractual increases to health insurance and transportation, and the out-of-district tuition rates have increased 14%. So we have to account for all of those additions, plus the 18 million from ESSER. So let's say if we estimate about 10 to 12 million for contractual increases, plus the 18 million, that would be $30 million that we would need, that we won't.
Okay. This is the preliminary. When are we going to sort of develop a actual preliminary budget? I know that's between you and the superintendent, correct? You have some dates there. I saw some dates in the back.
Not even that, just even in the packet that you have. Oh, no, this one didn't have that. We took it out. So in the next meeting, I will have something, the budget document, the one that, you know what I'm talking about, right? The actual thing that we approve at the end, the budget spreadsheet. Instead of it being in a book form, I can bring I could start bringing budget documents to you guys. Next meeting, we're going to ask you to approve the amounts that the schools are going to get. So, in their fair student funding pools, you may not be aware of this, but we did the fair student funding. So each school gets the autonomy to spend the money in the way that they see fit. So,
Okay, so you'll be bringing that into the next meeting, and we'll have that discussion then. Okay, any other questions? Ms. Martin?
So, Ms. Turner, we're gonna, at the next meeting, you're gonna be bringing the fair student funding proposal. So when this was developed, when these dollar figures were assigned to each one of the schools based on their population and all that, was that done with the recognition that we could be looking at a decrease in overall funding?
that's
Like
what
if
we're doing.
when we don't know what we're actually going to be getting. I'm concerned about that when we know that we have the guardrails in place.
I think your question is asking, have we accounted for the possibility, I mean, are we planning for the reductions that we face when we give the schools an allocation amount? Is that what you mean? Like, are we going to reduce the schools at all? We're not sure yet. We're going through, we had a budget meeting today with the chiefs, and we started the process of going through and just page by page to see where there's possibilities before we even think of affecting schools. So at this time, we were just going through trying to balance, like, see what's going on, and then we wouldn't want to hurt the schools until we know whether we need to. So, but we are going to consider that, of course.
Okay.
So that
I just want to, put it out there. We can recognize that, and this was said many, many times. The fair student funding was, and a lot of our increased spending in these last couple of years was defended by saying that the state funding was going to be rising at a level that would come close to meeting ESSER. That we were, that because of the changes at the State House and the legislation that was, ensuring an increase in education funding, the assumption was that as we were adding on positions, we were making all these changes, that, we could count on those funds from the state. So looking at the current state budget, looking at a budget that's just gone through 9 seat cuts for this current year, I think we need to be very cognizant of the fact that next year, as was anticipated, chances are we're not going to get that full amount of the fair student funding coming in. So I'm just, again, we kind of spoke about this in a lot of different ways and in a lot of different contexts, but the kind of the days of wine and roses are over, and we're going to really, I think, start to feel it in this next budget cycle, and we should be anticipating it. And again, I understand, I'm not looking at the fair student funding part of it, the school-based part of it, as the only place that we would be cutting, because it certainly wouldn't be. But I do think it's going to be a year where we're back to making those kinds of decisions.
I do remember exactly when you said it, you did emphasize it, and I have to admit that I'm one of the ones that actually had faith in the Student Opportunity Act money, because they said it was going to be.
You did.
Yeah,
I
I
applaud your
did.
faith.
Huh? What'd you say?
I applaud your faith.
Oh, yeah, you see, and I did have faith, because when they said 1/6 of the budget, and I assumed if we got 30 million last year, that we would get close to that this year, and it went from 30 million to 14 million. So I'm a guilty culprit. I did have faith in the 1/6 rule, but so you're right, we should definitely be more conservative, but it's only 14 million, unless they come up with, like you said, they might come up with 9 C cuts, but I still feel like that calculation can't be right. And I emailed Rob O'Donnell at DESE, because how can we go from 30 million to 14 million if it's 1/6? So I still have my faith.
Ms. Martin, I'd like to interject and share with you. I'm grateful that you're prescient and you're absolutely right about the budget. The increase in state funding to schools does not make up for the loss of ESSER. But you and I, Ms. Martin, were at work many years ago when we were making cuts to budgets that were bare bones. That is not the case. We have hundreds of thousands of dollars in supplements gone to schools. Supplements, right? For everything from positive behavior teachers, social workers, substitutes, and so on. That, many of them very fine ideas, but hundreds of thousands of dollars. It will not be difficult to put the budget together without ESSER. Yes, there may be some trimming that we need to make, but it's going to be doable. I appreciate Ms. Turner saying that for the next school committee meeting, we'll have an update on fair student funding. I don't anticipate we'll be able to ask you to approve the amount at that time because we'll still have decisions to make.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, motion to adjourn by Mr. Conway, seconded by Ms. Martin. Roll call.
No, we just adjourned.
No, adjourn, even better. Great, thank you.